I am going to speak a little fast because I do have a lot of information to go through that I think you'll want to hear today. Very quickly, just my gratitude to Kenzie and to Bryce and to Angela for giving Solutions the platform on this tour. We're super excited to be here. We totally support everything you guys are doing, and just happy to be part of the group. So thank you. A little bit of the goals that I'd like to try to get through today to you guys is, one, the importance of raw material sourcing. So I've been in this game since about 2010. I had a previous pet food company with my sister Jacqueline, and we did this for over a decade, and I did all the sourcing as well as formulation for that company. And it's we'll get into it, and I'll talk about that a little bit further. I'd like to see everyone walk away today with a greater need to support regenerative and polyculture farming. Really important in what we do. And most importantly, probably today, I want to reduce your fears about pathogens and raw feeding, because I know there's a lot of information. I know there's a lot of fear mongering. And I'm hoping with my background in nutrition and food science and coming from the food industry, I can hopefully quash some of those fears today. And then just overall, give you the confidence for the benefits of feeding a raw diet. So that's the goals today. A little bit of my background. I have to give kudos to my big sis, Jacqueline. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but she is the reason I am here today. And I'm sorry if I get a little bit teary-eyed about it, but I have my background is I have a master's in nutrition and food sciences. I was taught very conventional, better eating through science and chemistry, right? Which is what a lot of us, unfortunately, in the Western diet are trained to do, and we do the same thing for our pets. I had my epiphany many years ago when my sister Jacqueline introduced me to the Weston A. Price Foundation. And I had to humble myself as a scientist and say, ooh, geez, you know, I mean, my background in education is all very beneficial. There's a baseline that you learn as far as chemistry and biochemistry, and all that feeds into what we're doing. But it's a different paradigm. It's a different paradigm shift when you understand that what they're teaching in Western medicine and the Western diet is very much contradictory to nutrition and health. So I have about 25 years in the industry, 13 years in pet food. I have been a raw pet food formulator for over a decade now. And one of the things that I do that I think is beneficial, because it's the arena that we have to play in, is I attend the annual AFCO meetings. I do it begrudgingly because it's really sad, really, when you go to these things. It's very disappointing when you see what the powers that be write the definitions for what goes into not only our pet food, but our livestock feed as well. And that's some of the things. So we go because we want to advocate and be an advocate for raw pet food, because a lot of right now, the FDA, CVM, which is the Center of Veterinary Medicine, look at raw pet food feeding as a trend and as something that's going to go away and is really not appropriate. So we have two very distinct camps that you as a consumer are trying to wade through, right? And go like, my vet says this, and then, you know, this holistic vet says that, and this nutritionist says this, and where do I go for the right information? So I'm hoping that through this, we can dispel some of the myths and we can give you confidence that you need. And then, of course, I was mentored by my big sis, Jacqueline Hill. She had a very long career in the pet food industry. She was a pioneer in this industry. And honestly, she's the reason that you see raw goat milk on the shelves in pet food stores today. So kudos to Jacqueline, I miss you. Okay, so solutions for our pets and for the planet is kind of what we're about. So let's get into it. So biodynamic agriculture or polyculture farming is basically, you can't get this in corporate big ag, okay? So monoculture farming is a single source. It's your soybean growers, it's your Monsantos of the world, your ADMCs that just grow soy or just grow corn. So we want to support the farms that are doing, hi Luna, that are doing it right. And that means that you're going to have these smaller farms that do an array of different types of animals and different types of crops. So this is where we want to source our raw materials for our pet foods. And this is what is the #1 priority at Solutions to get it right from our farms. And again, I apologize for the graphs. They're a little bit hard to see. But just going back to my food industry experience before I came over to pet food, I will admit I worked in research and development for 4.5 years for Jack in the Box. The reason that I'm saying that is Jack in the Box had one of the worst food safety incidences in history. In 1993, it unfortunately killed 4 children. Sorry about the train.
Killed 4 children!
Yeah. It infected over 500 people. So it's no joke, and we all want to take food safety very seriously, and we all want to make sure what we put in our bodies and what we put in our pets is not going to make them sick. But there's a lot of caveats to that, and there's a lot of fear mongering. So one thing that we learned, or I learned when I worked at Jack in the Box, and they were still paying off the lawsuits for that incident, is that what you feed the animals that go into making your food is huge, right? And to the point where in 1998, Diaz-Gonzalez here actually did a study for the USDA and said, if we took the beef cattle, the Angus cattle, off of grain and put them on grass, what does that do? And so they actually got some really distinct results here. And what you're seeing is E. coli. So the caveat or the culprit in the Jack in the Box incident was an organism called E. coli 0157H7. It was the first time that subcategory, or serovar, they call them serovars, was found. That was it. But so what we learned from that is that when we feed cattle grain, they actually produce an acid-resistant E. coli as a result of that. Because when you feed cattle something that's not species appropriate, their rumen changes, right? Because cattle should be on grass and forage, and they're ruminants, right? They're not really supposed to be eating GMO soy and corn and grains like that. So when they do eat that, as well as these other additives that are allowed to be put in cattle feed, I could spend a whole nother episode on that. It's really concerning, and it's really deplorable what we put into cattle feed. So as a result, we see that this acid-resistant E. coli. So our feeding of these cattle, we created, when I say we, as a society, created 0157H7. We're responsible for that, meaning at the level of how and why we feed these cows. So by putting them on grass, we're able to see that it actually reduced the incidence of what they shed. So these are log cells per gram. Basically, just in microbiology terms, this is times 10. So what they showed is in the grain-fed cattle down here, the resistant colonic pH E. coli was as high as 251,000 CFUs per mil. That's a pretty high amount of cells. In the no grain, they were on hay and pasture. The acid-resistant E. coli was 0. It didn't shed it. So what I'm saying is that E. coli, yes, might be present, but virulent E. coli that causes hemorrhagic dysentery and bleeding and kidney dysfunction, that is created because of the way we feed these cattle. So when you look and you're going to spend your dollar and you say, wow, that's 100% grass-fed beef is really expensive, and I could get this one over here that might be finished on grain, and it tastes good, but think about that. Think about that for yourself and for your pets. Okay, so dog and cat's physiology, again, is a little bit different than humans. So they are carnivores, and they produce enzymes in their saliva which actually kill pathogens. So this is why your dogs can go out and forage and scavenge on cat poop and rooster poop and things like that, because they do have the ability and have that, which really can neutralize pathogens. They don't produce amylase in their saliva. Typically, there'll be some controversy about that some vets will get behind, but typically they don't produce amylase. Amylase breaks down carbohydrates or starches. So they really don't have a propensity for carbohydrates in the diet. The teeth and jaw, of course, are designed for tearing, not for chewing cud or molars. They don't typically have molars that grind their food down. So they're supposed to gulp it and eat it fast. And they're designed to swallow their food in large amounts, and they have a very tiny cecum right here. Now the cecum in a ruminant is really long because that's where all the fibers, all that cellulose is broken down and fermented. Dogs don't have that. Dogs and cats have a very small cecum. So that's why when Dr. Kangas was talking about fermentation and from having fermented food, fermentation is a form of pre-digestion of your food. So you're using good bacteria to break down those proteins and those starches so that your dog can actually digest it, because it all goes through. But this is all defenses of why they don't get as sick or are not really, they won't be as prone to infection as we might be to pathogens. And this is why they can eat raw meat and they can eat raw foods. All right, moving right along. Okay, and I'm sorry if I'm speaking really fast, but I know that I want to keep going. Dr. Henry Pasternak did a great book, Healing Pets with Nature's Miracle Cures. He used to practice out of San Diego. I don't know if he's still actively practicing. I think he's pretty old by now, but you can see some of the top claims of both for felines and canines that go into the vet and what they present with. A lot of them is, again, ear infections, skin allergies, hot spots, stomach upset, digestion. And he says 90% of pets' health are due to what we're feeding them. And so we really have to start at that base with good nutrition so that we can get them under control. Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, one of my favorite authors, she's for a human nutritionist. She's also a neurosurgeon. The reason why I like to talk about her in her book is because she was a Russian neuroscientist. She was very conventionally trained, and then she had a child who presented with autism around 2 years old. And she was very dismayed because as a neurosurgeon, she felt like she didn't have the tools to help her child. And she's like, I'm a brain surgeon. What can I do to help my autistic son? So she went back to school for nutrition. She got a master's degree in nutrition, and she figured out that the gut and the brain have actually connection, very much so. And so that's why she named it the gut and psychology. It's also called the gut and physiology syndrome. And basically what that says is if the gut is out of balance, if there's dysbiosis there, it manifests itself systemically through the body and can affect the brain and how we think and how our mental capacity is. So the gut is so powerful. That microbiome is so important to get that right so that everything else in the body will work correctly. So I really do recommend her book. She does a great job, and her motto is all diseases begin in the gut. And I fully agree. So you may have heard of leaky gut syndrome. This is a condition also known as IBS or IBD, basically dysbiosis of the gut. And what happens, and this is why a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, I fed kibble, since my dog's been a puppy, and like everything was fine. I haven't had any problems. And all of a sudden they turn 6 or 7 years old. Or 5 years old, they're getting a lot younger now. Boom, like my dog can't eat chicken anymore. My dog can't eat sweet potatoes. Like my dog's reacting to everything. So what happened over those years is the body is very, very resilient, okay? And it will constantly put itself into a state of homeostasis or balance, okay? And it'll do that, and it'll pull from all the mechanisms in the body it can to keep itself balanced. So you're chugging along going, it's good, my dog's good, like this must be a great food. And then boom, all of a sudden they start reacting because the body gets overwhelmed at some point in time with so much inflammation and so much damage. Now it starts to manifest systemically in the body. And this is what leads to autoimmune disease. So when you bring your dog or cat to a vet and they say your dog has leaky gut, what they're talking about is you have so much inflammation that has started that it actually degrades the epithelial wall of your digestive system, those cells, to the point where you get these microscopic pores in the gut. And then everything can leak right into your bloodstream. So everything that goes into the body is almost like a toxin because it hasn't been digested correctly. And it goes right into the bloodstream. And your dog or your cat becomes very reactive. And now you have to back up and kind of say, okay, what is this? And so in Western medicine right now, the typical thing is to put a Band-Aid on it. So let me give you a drug. Let me give you, this drug that is going to suppress the immune response, because that's what this is. It's the body going, help me, help me, help me. No more toxins. And so rather than taking a pharmaceutical drug, it is more difficult to go back and do this nutritionally. So I applaud the people who are willing to do it. It's hard to do, but once you do it, you correct yourself for the rest of your life. And this will be for your dog as well. Okay, we're about 15 minutes in. So 100 trillion friends you never knew you had. This is really important, and I really want people to understand that they don't have to be afraid of bad bacteria. There is a place for it in our world, and there is a symbiotic relationship with a lot of it. And so striking that balance is really important when you are talking about feeding whole, nutritious, raw foods. So this is the best way I can explain it. This is the way I sat down and I'm like, all right, how can I kind of look at this? So I kind of studied the Hermetic principles a little bit, and I don't know if you guys have, it's kind of a philosophical type of thing. So has anybody heard as above, so below? Okay, so this is basically saying that physics, the laws of physics, chemistry are, as we see them on a macro scale, they're also on a microscopic scale. And if anybody's looked at the theory of what an atom may look like and the electrons and that rotate around a proton, it's very similar to what our solar system's like. So let's take a macro ecosystem, right? And the best, I love wolves. Wolves are like my spirit animal. So I'm always following wolf rescues and things. So a wonderful YouTube video, if you guys want to go to, is the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone. This is a major phenomenon, okay? The wildlife biologists that did this were like blown away, okay? So we, of course, in our infinite wisdom as humans, are like, we don't need wolves. So they were hunted out basically to extinction in the 1920s out of the Yellowstone National Park in that area. And the elk grew to tremendous proportions, and the macro ecosystem here got way out of balance. When they reintroduced those wolves, they saw just an amazing phenomenon of how this ecosystem came back into balance, right? So think about it. So if this is what it looks like on a large scale, and we know the wolf, okay, the big bad wolf, yes, they are a predator, they can be dangerous, they can attack livestock, but when they're put into the ecosystem correctly, and they're able to create balance, they don't destroy the ecosystem. We're able to live among them with the livestock. So think about it. So when these vets are saying, you don't want any pathogens in your food, salmonella, oh my goodness, or E. coli, think about those like a wolf. Think about if we take them out of that micro ecosystem altogether, what are we doing to the ecosystem? We don't know. We are not there yet on that level to understand the microbiome to that level where we can sit back and say, we don't need those. They're not doing any good for us. We do know that they can cause illness. They're called opportunistic pathogens. Just like a wolf is opportunistic as a predator, if they see an animal that's weak or weakened from the herd, that's the one they attack. That's how pathogens work in the body. If your immune system is weak, you're stressed, you're down, you're not eating well, you're not holding your end of the deal up for your body, those opportunistic pathogens will attack. If you're in good health and your immune system's working correctly, they're no problem. In fact, they often balance the ecosystem. So does that make sense to you guys? Okay, good. I'm hoping that. So again, just real quick about 2 more slides and we'll get moving on. But this is what I want to do to calm your fears a little bit about these pathogens. And when you go into your vet and they say, don't feed a raw diet because there's so much pathogens in it, it's going to get your dog sick, or you're going to get sick, or your child's going to get sick. Don't bring that stuff into the house, right? We have to put it in perspective, okay? We have to stop the fear mongering and really look at you know, a lot of these vets aren't experts in microbiology. They have a very broad, they have a lot to learn on physiology and stuff. And so they don't always focus down on that level of microbiology. And so being in food science and in food safety, obviously this is really important. But what I wanted to show you here is that when they actually, this is the FDA, and that's why I have that highlighted. They fed salmonella to volunteers, okay? So this is what I'm trying to get this perspective to you guys that, like, yes, salmonella can get you sick, but I want you to understand that there's 2,500 serovars. So a serovar is a subtype. So you have genus is salmonella, and then the species, right? You have E. coli, Escherichia coli is the species. There's sub-serovars of that. So there's like 2,500. So when the FDA pulls raw food from the shelf and they say it tested positive for salmonella, they're only testing for the genus. They're not testing for the serovar. And that's super important information to know because not all of them are virulent to the point where it's like Salmonella typhimurium is typhoid. That's typhoid fever. If you guys remember the Mary typhoid that walked around with that, that's a bad one. You don't want that one in your food. But Salmonella Kentucky or Polarum, or they fed this to actual volunteers that said, yeah, I'll drink that eggnog that spiked, and you know, and this is what they got. So what I'm trying to say is that the FDA realizes that it's a dose response. So you have to have a certain dosage of this before you get sick. And granted, we're all going to react differently to different doses because there are people who are immunocompromised. And I don't want to sound callous, and I don't want to sound careless to people who are dealing with immunodeficiency. But if we produce our food to the lowest common denominator of an immunodeficient person, then we're going to have to produce sterilized food. And if we continue to produce sterilized food, we're going to create a population of immunocompromised people, okay? That doesn't look good on the large scale. So we have to really think about this and think about where we want to go with this. And so I just want to challenge you all to look a little bit deeper into it to understand that. So this is a serovar here of different salmonellas. So you got Salmonella annuum, Newport, Derby, and people, they spiked eggnog with it, and then they fed it. And this is the attack rate. So 16% of them got sick. And when they said sick, maybe it was a little bit of stomach upset and diarrhea. Nobody died. They knew nobody was going to die, or they wouldn't have done these experiments. If you read in the abstract earlier, on the ones that were very virulent, they won't feed them to people. So I just want you guys to understand that not all salmonella is equal. Just because salmonella is in raw pet food doesn't mean you're going to get sick, or your dog's going to get sick, or anybody's going to get sick from it. It might be there, and it might just be part of the microbiome, and that's okay. So just understand that, and I know that I threw a lot at you guys today. Raw goat milk, one of the better, easy ways to get raw pet food into your cats and dogs. We have a ton of it at Solutions. We do different ones on that. We use cultures and fermentation. One of the things that we found that with raw milk can do is break down biofilm in the digestive tract. And so when a lot of these little critters, these pathogens or opportunistic pathogens will produce a polysaccharide biofilm, they kind of hide in your digestive system that way. So you can take these antibiotics and they're not working. Like, why am I still getting these recurring infections? So by drinking raw goat milk or raw milk in general, they have the digestive enzymes in there that will actually degrade biofilm. Now you release the bacteria, and they can actually, the antibiotics can get to them. So these are all like awesome things about food that are great for having that connection. And so, so real quick, I just want to take a really brief poll. Who here has gone to a vet and said, I want to feed raw food, and they said, don't do that, there's pathogens in it? Okay, good to see. Did anything I say today kind of sequester those fears at all? Yes. Okay, good. So raw cultured goat milk can be a great way to address the dysbiosis in the gut and to try to heal and seal the gut. and that's what we're looking to do. So you want to heal that gut, and then you want to seal it. So healing and sealing means bringing back that epithelial cells, closing up those micropores so the leakiness stops. Once you stop the leakiness, you'll be amazed at, like, my dog doesn't react to chicken anymore. My dog doesn't react to, sweet potatoes anymore. Like, this is amazing, but it takes time. It can take time, and it takes dedication. All right, I'm gonna whip through these, and then if you have questions about our products, what we do, bone broth is excellent, guys. Excellent way to seal that gut. Gelatin comes from bone broth. Real quick, I'll finish up on that. We have meat diets with cultures and fermentation. These are sort of the key takeaways on culturing and pathogens. So we use fermentation not only to help pre-digest the food, but as a pathogen inhibition. So every day it's a competition on your skin, in your gut, in your mouth for good to bad bacteria, right? And what we deliver into that system is going to either benefit the more beneficial bacteria or the virulent bacteria that might get us sick. So we constantly want to keep that balance. And so by doing the inoculation of these beneficial bacteria, we're keeping that balance so where pathogens won't be able to grow if they're there. They're not going to compete well. So that's one of the great things about fermentation. Love to use it. You'll see we have goat milk whey, we have fermented duck eggs, fermented ginger, fermented okra. Those are all things in our diets that will help, again, pre-digest that food and also protect it from pathogens. So even if you left this food out at a warmer temperature, as soon as it warms up, the first things that are going to want to grow are those lactic acid bacteria that are in there from the fermentation. So that's a great protection, and I think it lends itself really well to raw pet food. Food safety is sourcing. Number one, make sure your livestock is fed correctly. You cannot get healthy food from a sick animal. That's the motto, if you can take that away today. Most CAFCOs, confined animal feeding operations, the animals are sick. They're not in a good state. Whole foods, no synthetic vitamins. Be very careful with synthetics. I know a lot of manufacturers that use them to meet the AFCO requirements. That's, again, a whole nother lecture on why raw foods and fresh foods don't really fit into that category. And then lastly, fermentation, and then clean manufacturing. You guys can't read that probably down there. We clean up our processing with hot water and soap. That's it. So we don't use bromine and chlorine, the halogens. We don't use things, quats, that are going to just basically, be residuals that might be left there. You really can clean everything. If you're using good sourcing, you can clean up everything with hot water and soap. And cheeses we have. And then that's it. Questions? I know, I'm sorry I talked fast.